Hello and welcome to a guide to Final Fantasy XIV, A Realm Reborn Online. Now, this guide is primarily aimed at beginners, novices, those of you who have never even played a massive multiplayer online role-playing game like Final Fantasy XIV, but I'm hoping it will also be very useful to players who are already playing the game, but maybe this is their first MMO, to players who've played other MMOs and are now playing this MMO who aren't acquainted with it so much, and also for more experienced players, maybe there are bits and pieces in here that you haven't even contemplated or wondered what was going on. Now, as an MMO, there is a huge amount to this game, and I will be covering all of the things I think that are most important. There's a wealth of knowledge out there. Google is your friend. If you've got something much more obscure or specialized, the Final Fantasy XIV forums can help. You can sign up there and post. Or alternatively, ask me a question, leave it in the comments, and I'll do my best to help you as much as I can. In this first episode, I'm going to be covering character creation and how to set up the heads-up display. If there is time, I will then go over the setup for the PlayStation 4 controller, but I think I will leave that for the next episode, as I don't want these episodes to run too long. So, I'm not going to show you the character creation screen or any of the introductory cutscenes into Final Fantasy XIV. I'll leave that for you to discover. But the character creation screen system is very in-depth, very intricate. You can create an awful lot of looks, female and male, in a variety of different races. None of those things matter. It's all aesthetics, but aesthetics do matter to us, and one of the attractions of playing a game like this, the multiple looks and things that you can collect, etc. But I'll be going on about how you can change your look and things like dyeing clothes, etc. later on. The most important aspect of character creation is choosing a role for your character, an initial role I should say, because every character in Final Fantasy XIV, every player can have a character that has all of the roles. Every available way of approaching and playing the game is available to you. But initially, you should just choose one class. The description that Final Fantasy XIV gives to a specific job or thing for a character to do in the game, and initially they are called classes. So during character creation, at the end, when you've created the look and appearance of your character, you'll be asked, after a couple of other things, which class would you like to be? If you are a beginner, I suggest that one of three options. You don't have to follow this, but I would advise it if you've never touched an MMO or if you're new to Final Fantasy XIV. The classes I would suggest are 1. The Archer, 2. The Lancer, or 3. The Thaumaturge. It's very hard to pronounce that one, but you'll see it. It's Thaumaturge, I believe, which is a conjurer. So if you choose one of those three, which are all damage per second classes, it'll give you a good and more easy journey as you level up. But again, it's up to you whether you choose those or not. The reason I suggested those are that in an MMO, and in Final Fantasy XIV, in fact all MMOs, since EverQuest and onwards, there have been three main groups, subdivisions of all of the things that characters can do. And those three main groups are tanks, DPS, which stands for damage per second, or damage dealers, and healers. And these subdivisions exist because many of the activities that you do in these games involve lots of other players, and you need separate subdivision groups to do separate work. So the tanks hold aggression when you're facing enemies. They attract all the enemies towards them and ideally take as much damage from those enemies towards themselves, so the other players in the group aren't taking the bulk of the damage. The healers, therefore, are essential for keeping the tank alive and anybody else who's taking damage. The healers specialise primarily in healing and getting rid of bad effects on the characters. The DPS, although you might think they have the easiest time of it because they just concentrate on doing damage to creatures, they need skill to avoid damage, to do other use other skills and actions that help the whole party, etc. So those are the three main subdivisions, and the three classes I suggest are all in damage per second, the damage per second subdivision. So once you've decided on a class, you'll come into a beginning stage, which isn't launching you straight into the MMO, but it will introduce you to your first quest. Before you do that, it'll ask you which controller scheme you want, either a keyboard or a mouse, or a controller if you're on the PlayStation 4. If you're on PC, obviously it's going to be a keyboard and mouse. I will be talking about the PlayStation 4 controller setup. If you're a PC owner, there are many tutorials on key bindings, not necessarily for Final Fantasy XIV. There are great ones for World of Warcraft, for instance, that you can see on YouTube, and it'll give you a good grounding on how to assign skills and actions that your character can do to the keyboard and the mouse. So I will leave that up. If you have a PC, that'll be up to you to do. I won't be covering that in these videos, but there's plenty of information out there. So once you've got to that stage, and I'm going to assume, of course, that you take the PlayStation 4 controller, what you can do then is change the way the information on the screen is displayed. Now, here's the first tip. If you ever want to do some videoing or take some still photos or whatever of the game, on the PlayStation controller it is L1 and push down on the touchpad, and it'll bring up your HUD. We call it the heads-up display, HUD, H-U-D. And so you see L1 touchpad, L1 touchpad. Now you'll see it's quite a minimal setup. It's good. It's quite clear where everything is. You're not getting bombarded so much with information, and all's good. So how did I set this up? And if you press options, you'll come to a load of sub-menus, and if you're first starting out, you go, oh my, that's an awful lot to take in. But be assured, all of this becomes pretty familiar fairly quickly, and a lot of it's self-explanatory, and an awful lot of it will be explained with tutorials as you go through the game. So if you scroll from the character sub-menu where I am now all the way to system, and you see HUD layout, if you press that, you'll come up to this. Now, whoa, if this is the first time you've seen this, you're going to be, oh, that looks really complicated. But it isn't. And I want to do this as briefly as possible. So what you could do is you can either mimic what I've done here, or you can do it whichever way you want. If you use the cursor keys, you come down to what's known as current UI element. And all that means is which little part of this, all these boxes, are you going to move? And if you press the X button, you'll have a selection, and you can select, you see all of these, which are all the boxes. Now, from all the hotbars from 1 to 10, if you're on a PlayStation 4, you're not going to use them. Those are for PC users, they're not used. And what you can do, if you'll see, is you can move them if I move one of them around so you can see clearly, I've moved them, the vertical ones all over here, and the horizontal ones all over here, like a cross over here. But it doesn't really matter, you're not going to see them on screen anyway. I've moved them like that because it makes everything else then easier to see when you're in this option. The pet hotbar is only applicable to one class, and that is the Arcanist. Because I'm not going to be showing you an Arcanist at the moment, I've put it down here and out of the way. The cross hotbar we'll talk about more in depth later on. I've put it there. You can resize each of these elements as it shows you at R3, like this. I tend to 2 clicks from the initial, the lowest setting. So I can see it, but it's not too, it's not obscuring too much. Progress bar, again, resized and put there. The progress bar shows actions you're doing, the time that it takes. The target bar is up here. I've placed it there nicely, just slightly, above eye level. And that's whatever you're targeting, information on whatever you're targeting. The focus target bar can go next to it like this. The scenario guide. Now, if you're a complete beginner, you might want to have that somewhere where you can see it. It'll give you more information on what on specific things you're doing. But I, as an experienced player, I don't want it. And I've put it right down there on the right-hand corner. Here's something you can do. If you see on the HUD layout submenu there, it says hide display with triangle. And if I press triangle, you'll see in the scenario guide, look, if all that information came up and then it disappeared. Now, why is it disappearing? Because the actual word scenario guide in that box is changing from white to purple. White to purple. When you have it purple, selecting with a triangle, it means whatever's in there won't show on the screen when you come out of the HUD layout. So you can switch all of these, the boxes you aren't using, move them out of the way so you can see them in the HUD display, but also make sure the lettering in the boxes is purple, and you won't get to see that. They won't be showing any information or anything when you come out of this selection screen. Party list you can leave where it is. Alliance list 1 and 2 are for multiplayer events. I've resized them and put them there. They're not particularly that important. They just give you some idea of when you go into certain events, you'll be split into 1 of 3 teams, and those are the other teams. Your team, the team that you're in, will be under party list, so you don't need to really worry about that. Enemy list, place it there near party list, because that will give you a nice list next to the party of the enemies that you're fighting. The parameter bar is your health and your magic points. Depending on your class, both of them will be useful, or one of them will be useful again, but you'll find that out later. Resized it, put it right at the top. Experience bar gives you an indication of how much experience to your next level. Status info here. There are 3 boxes. These are really important. Put them under the parameter bar in clear view, especially when you start to get later on in the leveling process, and later on when you start to getting more difficult challenges. These 3 boxes give you loads of information about things that are enhancing your character, things that are hurting your character, enfeeblements, and other information. And you need to know those things, so put them where you can glance at them, because later on you're going to need to know what's going on. Mini-map is self-explanatory. I've put it there and resized it. Notices. I've put them there, if you see. And that's just system messages that come to you from in-game. Main menu I don't use, so I've put it there in the bottom right. The main menu mimics the options button on the controller. Duty list, that's all the quests that you're doing, so I'll move that there. You can resize that and put you where you want. I put it under the mini-map on the right-hand side. The server information is your connection status and the time, local time. You can change your time with some other options. skill is the currency, and inventory grid I don't use. I don't know why it's particularly useful. All it does, it shows you a kind of illustration of how many things you've got in your inventory. So I've never been really clear why that is useful. If I bring it up, you'll see. So it just shows you kind of what's in your bag. Maybe useful if you're using a lot of potions and things, but other than that, I really don't have any use for it. So I click that out and I just hide it over there. Item help you can leave where it is, action help you can leave what it is, and the limit gauge is very important for multiplayer events. I've put that under the experience bar so I can see it clearly, and I'll be talking about the limit gauge later on. Now, when you've moved everything where you particularly want it, whether again you're mimicking where I've put it and follow my suggestions, or you're more experienced, you want to put things elsewhere, or you just want to try something, fine. Use the cursor keys to come down and press save. Really important. Save it, because if you click out without saving, everything will just be the same as when you started and you have to do it all over again. Click out and that's the end result. Okay, so that is how you set up your HUD and you change it. And at that point I'm going to leave this first guide lesson, if you want, or guide episode, however you wish to describe it, and in the next episode I'm going to talk about the crossbar, hot crossbar, and start to talk about the level progression and combat. So thank you very much for watching and listening. Catch you next time.